Hi, my name is Sean Walker. I'm a product excellence architect and part of the Ranger team here at ServiceNow. This video is a recording of the live Installing Hardware Asset Management mini-series that was held on July 22nd, 2025. This was a part 2 in the series. In the video, it will review the HAM maturity items on the Success Portal, primarily on the crawl phase. And then throughout the video, there'll be some live demos of specific topics and other questions that are posed by some of the customers who attended. I'm going to kind of freeform today a little bit because, as I said, hopefully you've all watched the video. Randy's video is very good, very comprehensive. I even rewatched it to make sure I knew the stuff that he was covering. But I'm probably going to freeform it and go right into an instance and talk directly from an instance rather than a PowerPoint presentation today. But we will still send out this presentation, and this is the entire presentation directly from that video. So we really wanted to talk about the asset, the Success Portal, the maturity section of that, and we're talking specifically today about the crawl phase, right? Because we've just gone through the webinar where you've done the installation, right? You now should have HAM installed in your environment. You've checked all those things off. You've got it installed. Now what, right? And when we look at the IT asset management capability blueprint, right, we're right at the beginning. And again, we're assuming that you're installing HAM and you're new. Some of you may be coming from, base asset management or something, or some of you may be customers who are using, like I know, Rebecca, you've been doing this for a long time. But it doesn't hurt to take, to look at asset management in this tier, in this capability tier. And really what we need to focus on is that level one, that trustworthy data, right? Without that trustworthy data, you can't build that pyramid. You can't become best in class at those processes if you don't have solid, reliable data, right? That is really what we need to ensure is that you trust what's coming in so you can build on it. So that's really what we focus on in the crawl phase, is getting that in there. Get your feet off the ground, understand your data, and then start building, in your practical management. That's when you can start building those base processes, and then operational integration. You can start bringing in that other data and then eventually become best in class when it comes to those certain processes. And one thing to remember within asset management, whether it's HAM or SAM, you have to understand what your objectives are as an organization, right? Yes, you can read the textbooks and say, I need to do X, Y, and Z, right, to become a truly world-class asset management team. Yeah, sure, but what about you? What does your organization truly need? What do you need to be best in class in for your organization, right? So when you're building the pyramid, you're looking at the data. We really say, for example, I really, really need to track my asset disposals. We had potentially a compliance issue, right, with data security or something like that, or maybe an environmental protection because our assets weren't properly disposed and we couldn't prove that we have properly disposed of our assets, right? So that's something a very, very big objective for our organization. We need to have this data, needs to be reliable. We need to trust that we're disposing effectively, securely, safely, environmentally friendly, etc. So putting that best-in-class disposal process in place is something you don't necessarily need to worry about other, maybe you're not doing things as well on, say, the RMA front or something like that, or something else. But you are, or total cost of ownership or something like that, but you are tracking the states of your assets and successfully tracking all your disposals and tracking all of your, just to have a reliable vendor and getting all your disposal certificates, et cetera, et cetera. And you truly have every piece of that. Every single piece of your hardware that's going out of your organization and where it is and what it's doing. That can be best in class. So when you're building this tier of trustworthy data, think about what's important to your organization. That's essentially what I'm getting at. So, and build it from there. What are those data points I need to get what I need for my organization? All right, so I'm gonna keep scrolling the wrong way. So I'm just gonna get right out of my presentation and stop you guys from seeing that. And we're gonna just jump into the hardware asset management workspace. And I navigated to the Success Portal. and basically click on View All Maturity Items. And that's going to bring up the Success Portal. Now, if you're brand new and you're just installing HAM and you're trying to get to this place, you might see absolutely nothing here. That is because the maturity items are part actually of our content download. So those maturity items won't come down right away, or they will come down with the download, the content download, and then there's another job that needs to happen. So you guys actually might look like this, where you have nothing. Okay, don't worry. If you do need to trigger it, you can trigger the content download, and you'll see right in there. Like if I go to scheduled jobs, and we go to here, and this was part of our presentation from last week, right? We had in part of the guided setup, we have the download content. So if you're trying to get HAM implemented quickly, you probably want to manually trigger these download jobs yourself, just to get the content down faster. And you see as part of download hardware, you've got download maturity items. And to be honest, once this content is downloaded, it still doesn't mean they're going to show up in the workspace. There's another job, and I'll be honest, I don't know which one that is. There's a HAM daily job. It could be part of that, which will actually populate this workspace. So again, it's not going to populate instantaneously, but again, it's not really critical. It's not going to impact your implementation by any stretch of the imagination. So you may see it look like this. If that's the case, download those maturity items, wait a day or two, and they should appear just like this. So there's different phases of the maturity, right? There's the crawl phase, the walk phase, and the run phase. And today we're really just going to focus on the crawl phase. You've likely already got some stuff done in the walk phase, so you can probably look at all of those as well once you've gone through these. So any questions so far on the maturity items or the workspace or how to get there? Okay. All right then. So I'm going to start off with the first one, and we talked about this last week, and that's the HAM guided setup. And so really within these maturity items, it really tells you the very steps to complete it, right? So you basically what you want to do is you navigate to, your guided setup, your HAM guided setup, and perform all the marks, right? So it's exactly like I said, we're going to come in here to HAM, right? We're going to look at guided setup, and I'm just going to open this in another window. And here's our HAM guided setup that we worked on last week, right? We're at 100% now. So, okay, everything's good there. We can actually start this task. And then we can go through, do the guided setup, whatever, and we can actually complete this task. And now we have it, it's closed, completed. And so if we come back in here to our maturity items, it should eventually refresh saying complete. Close, complete. Right? So we can see that it's moved the marker. So these are, again, just checks to make sure you are doing everything you need to do. And you can see here, even resource category opt-in is part of the maturity assessment, right? And we talked about this again. This is one of the items in the HAM guided setup, right? But there may be some things you need to review. Maybe one of your administrators installed HAM for you. Maybe a partner installed HAM for you, right? And they went through the guided setup, but you need to come back and check what your resource categories are. And so I do want to take a little bit of time to talk about HAM resource categories today. So again, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to HAM. I'm going to go to resource categories. And again, I'll open this in another tab so it doesn't lose that. And we can see here, if you remember last week when we did the guided setup, right, I left everything enabled, and every single resource category is enabled, and they all have an impact on our subscriptions. So you have to look at this from your organization, and again, what you agreed, like when you purchased HAM, how many subscription units were you purchasing because you were planning on managing X assets. So again, which class of assets are you as an organization planning on managing, right? And you can actually change those resource categories. So for example, we don't care about monitors. We don't have any fancy monitors. So it's really just a kind of essentially monitors are a consumable, we're saying. in this case, right? So we don't really care about managing these. We don't need normalization, etc. So we can actually turn off this resource category, and it's going to warn me here when I opt out. And I'm going to turn this off. So that means if we do have any monitors in our asset estate and in our ServiceNow instance, it's not going to charge us those subscriptions. But again, they're not going to be part of those flows, right? So we can just close that out. Now that was just an example. It's going to again depend on your organization, on what you as an organization want to do. Any questions so far?
Well, you just solved 3 of my problems. Thank you.
Oh, well, yeah, I love that. I don't know what I did, but woohoo, yay for me.
No, I just, okay.
All right, here's where I'm going to get more complicated for some of you people that have been around. Like you say, are you a greenfield customer? Is there anybody here? I don't know, maybe you can just do a raise hand or something that is what's a greenfield customer. So ServiceNow is brand new to your organization. I'm not seeing any hands go up. So that means everybody probably has ServiceNow already, and they're just adding ham. Okay, so if you've been around for a while and your ServiceNow's been around for a while, you could very well have assets in different classes, right? One of the common things we see is if we look, this end user compute one, right? This is tied to the computer class.
Mhm.
And what we see a few times I've seen where customers have been around a while they use different classes. They use PC, laptop, or PC was a workstation or something like that, which is a different class within the CMDB. And it's not part of the computer class. So how do I get that opted in? Because what we'll see happen is those particular devices won't count as in terms of opted in to the resource category. So where I want to add some of my own custom classes to the resource categories, and how do I do that? So what you would want to do is you want to take a look at your model categories. So I always go, I'm old school, I go to look at my model categories through here, and I look at my model categories in the list view. Sorry, I'm old school. Does anybody need more information on what a model category is? It's a fairly complicated, well, it's important, but it's a little confusing. And it's okay if it is. That's why we're here. Nobody's speaking up, so I'll give a quick overview. So essentially what a model category is going to do is you're going to categorize your assets and you're going to categorize your CIs basically. And what it is that relationship between your CI class and your asset class. So if we look here, right, we got the name of the model category. We've got the CI class. So this is the table within the CMDB that CI will sit, right? And we also have asset class. So in this particular case, accessories is a model category. It has a CI class, but it doesn't have any corresponding asset classes. So there is no relationship between asset and CI here. Whereas if we come down to, let's actually go back up here to computer. It's fairly common, right? We can see here we've got the computer table. So the computer class sits, all the computer records are going to sit in this table. It's tied to that resource category, end user computers. And on the asset side, they're stored in the ALM hardware table. And there's that. So that's the relationship. And then what happens is there's jobs that come in. So whether you're creating an asset from scratch through the workspace and you go new asset, right? You're in this ALM hardware table and you say it's a computer, it's going to create that corresponding CI in this table, right? That's that relationship that happens, and that's based off your model, etc. So that's really important to understand. It's that relationship between your CI and your assets. So as I was saying, some of the people, older school people, might have like a model category that's laptop, and I won't because I'm pretty much a greenfield. I'm pretty much a greenfield instance, so I'm not going to have those model categories. But it's highly possible for people to have those model categories that are unique to you. But when I look, right? And I look at what resource categories I'm opted into, oops, I can see here that not all classes are here, right? Only some of these classes are opted into. So what happens when I have another class, right, that I need to opt in here? So I don't, again, I have demo data here, so it's harder to show you, but I'm going to basically take a look here for server, because there's a lot of different server classes. And I can see not all of them are opted in for resource categories, right? So what I can do is say, for example, and this again is an example, and say, for example, we want to include, I'm looking at ones that don't, FTP servers, for example. We need to have those part of a resource category, and we need to be opted in for those resource categories. I can't just add the resource category to add it to the resource category. It doesn't work that way. What you have to do, and in this, I'm hoping we change with future iterations of this, is you have to add the actual class to, or the model category to the parent category. So I'm going to add it to a server category, and I'm going to save it here. And so what this will do is that even though it still shows here as the resource category is empty, it's now part of the server parent category, and therefore it's going to be opted in. So if I look now at my ham resource categories, actually I have it open over here. If you're going to cooperate, no, it's not going to cooperate. All right. So if I look at my ham resource categories and I look at my servers, I should now see FTP server. So now that FTP server is included as part of this resource category. So if you have custom categories out there, you're going to want to go and kind of do what I did, is go to that model category and add it to a parent. So if you have PC and laptop, make sure that parent model category says computer, and then it will show up here.
Can I ask a quick question here? IP camera, would it be its own parent category, or would you categorize that under like network gear?
One of the other plugins that you can check to see is there's a plugin called CMDB class model, I think is what it's called. And CMDB class model contains a lot of different classes, right? So if you have, and so these are basically some stuff that has been found over the years that it will go, and what it'll do is create different classes within the CMDB. I think IP cameras are part of a different class, and I honestly can't remember what the class is.
Yeah.
So
Our
if you
CI
have
class we
that,
have it identified with is IP camera, so I didn't know if it needs a parent, but I don't have it as in a resource category. That was the problem
you
were
won't
solving.
have it in a resource category, likely, no.
Yeah.
Because it would be a custom class, right? These are just going to be your
Yep.
out of the box default classes.
Okay.
So you'd want to check that. You'd want to check
Okay,
that.
thanks.
Yeah. So again, I know that's a little complicated. Again, CMDB class model is something your administrators should be doing, right? Especially if you're using CMDB Discovery, right? Those are definitely some plugins I would look at when I go into a customer's instance. Do they have all their patterns updated for Discovery, and do they have CI class models? Because it gives you that expanded CMDB classes to store those assets in, or store those CI data and then potentially corresponding assets in.
Sorry, quick thing. I'm just taking a look at ours. Our AV equipment, which has a lot of IP camera type stuff, it's all automatically classified as workstation. Now, I don't know if someone did that before I came along, or I'm just sharing.
It could be, and you're seeing that in model categories then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then that's a customization that was done, yeah, for sure. Because if I just look, I'll almost switch back over here to a different instance. So I got a bunch of instances going that are all at different phases. So if I look at my model categories, right? What did you say that was? Sorry,
workstation. And yeah, it was probably a consultant we had in a couple years ago.
Yeah, see, like there's nothing. We said video, right? Or something like that.
AV, I think.
AV.
Yeah.
AV equipment, right? So you can see I do probably have these are some of the expanded classes for the CMDB class model, right? So I can see AV equipment is going to this expanded
Interesting,
class.
yeah. But and in my IP cameras, I'm speaking of the ones that are in our conference rooms. They're not the ones sitting on our desktop, you know.
Yeah. There's a lot of that. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that. So again, this is getting into the weeds in terms of CMDB, and it's confusing, I know, for especially for newer customers, and that's why we're here is we're newer customers. And essentially what you can see here, this is the CI class manager, which shows you basically all of the different CI classes. You can see there's so much stuff in
Yeah.
here, right? These are all the different ways of classifying your assets or your devices or everything within the CMDB, right? Um, and so there could be, like, if we looked for IP, might be something for IP camera, or we could look for IP camera. There it is there, right? So IP camera is actually stored under imaging devices, which is part of IoT devices, which is part of hardware.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to take you down the rabbit hole.
No. And I go down rabbit holes a lot, but I will get back on track for everybody else because again, we're here for people who are just starting. So again, that's very detailed on model our resource categories, right? But again, it's important, as you can hear by some of the people who have this stuff going on and have customizations within their organization. Check to make sure the categories you want to manage and need to manage are opted in, and the ones that you don't are opted out. So that was my advice. Basically, check that for yourselves and make sure you have what you need. And once you've done that, you can go ahead and complete this particular maturity item. And that's why the maturity item's here, right? Is we want you to go through that and make sure you're managing what you should be managing. We get complaints and we get customers saying, oh, well, I don't know why these aren't showing up as part of my, as part of my disposal flow. Well, it's because the resource category is not opted in. So you're not managing that class. So opt in and it will become available. And it's like, oh, it's a very simple fix. And resource categories wasn't always there with ham. This
Right.
came in.
I have a question.
Sure.
When, so for the resource category, what's the suggestion? Do you create the CI first or the asset? Or does the CI create? I mean, because I see that the asset class, some of it is blank. So
Okay.
what's the
Yeah, and
suggestion?
some of it will be, right? So if we think about the difference between assets and CIs, what we have to think about when we start thinking whether or not we need both of those, right? So if I look here, do I really need an asset class for a Java server here? Because you see that asset class is blank. And the answer
Right.
to that is no, right? In this particular case. So CIs are used to manage the operations of our business. So CIs are, you're going to create an incident against the CI. You're going to create a change against the CI. You're going to use it to map applications on your servers, etc. are going to be CIs, right? Assets are what we use to track the financial and contractual pieces of their physical devices, right? A virtual or an application, in this case, Java server is an application that runs on a server. I don't have any warranty tied to that. I don't have any purchasing information tied to that. I don't have anything like that tied to that. It's just simply an application that exists on a server. So I don't need to track it as an asset, but I may need to open an incident against Java server because it's not functioning on this device. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes.
And it can go both ways, right? You may have an asset class. So for example, if you look at consumables, right? Consumables don't have a CI class, but they do have an asset class. And consumables, I think, actually is on the maturity items, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, we start talking about, where is it? It is, I thought it was one of these. I think it's this one, maybe.
Yeah.
Basically, I don't remember which one it was. One of the maturity items, essentially, which assets am I managing, right? Am I going to be managing consumables or not as an organization? And that's an organizational decision that you need to make, whether you're going to manage those or not. But again, say I've seen organizations that track everything down to the cable. I have an HDMI cable that I'm tracking. A lot of companies with AV equipment will track cables, right? Because it's part of a bundle, etc. So those are being tracked, but as consumables, because am I going to really open up an incident for an HDMI cable? Probably not. I'm going to open up an incident against a laptop not, or a monitor not working, or a laptop not working, or something like that, and it's going to be the cable, and I just swap out the consumable. Um, so that's kind of where we don't necessarily need to track everything. And so we definitely don't need it as a CI. It's not going to be part of usually as an operational piece of our business, but some might be, right? And if we need to track anything on a serialized basis, like earlier I opted out of monitors, some companies do track monitors, and monitors are serialized. So I could track monitors as a hardware asset, or I could track them as consumables. Depends on my organization and what I want to track and manage. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry, I'm not sure who asked that. I can't really see who's asking.
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm gonna, we'll move off of resource categories and we're gonna move into stock rooms. And so again, I do have a separate video specifically on stock rooms now that I posted. And I think there's a link in the presentation as well. But if you haven't started thinking about stock rooms, you really should. Right? Stock rooms are really, really important for you to be able to manage your assets and where your assets live when they're not deployed. So, you may think, everybody might be thinking, okay, well, stock rooms is this big official room, but I guarantee you there's like a cubicle in some offices that have a bunch of IT equipment. That's still a stock room. You still need to know where it is, right? And stock rooms are a really critical piece to managing your inventory because you need to know where things are at all times within your organization. If they're, as I said, if they're not deployed, they are somewhere, and you need to know where that somewhere is so you can effectively manage it. So you really want to think about how your stock rooms are working within your organization, and you want to make sure they're set up properly. You can also start thinking about things about operationally. How does my organization work when it comes to deploying assets? Somebody requests a mouse, right? And that somebody sits in a remote office, right? For example, I am a remote employee. I do not go to an office. I cannot go to an office because there's only 4 of us and I live in the middle of Canada, right? So there's no office anywhere close to me. I'm a remote employee. So which stockroom would, when I put a request in for a mouse, which stockroom is going to serve me, right? So that's important to think about as well too, and having those particular locations set up and those particular stockrooms set up to be able to handle those kind of requests. Stockrooms have come a long way from what they were within base asset as well too, right? So if I come into just like a stock room here, I can see a bunch of different information, like in terms of service locations, and this one doesn't have any, or distribution channels. This one does have a distribution channel. And so those are really important in terms of your inventory management. So like I was saying, I'm a remote employee in the middle of Canada, right? I don't have a stock room close to me. My nearest stock room is in Toronto. So what my organization, I'm thinking, I don't know, I've never seen our instance, but I'm thinking what they have is they have a service location set up for any remote Canadian employee that says our warehouse in Canada serves all of these locations. And so when I put in a request, it's going to go to Toronto team to deploy that mouse to me. Because that's where the mouse lives, that's where the team lives, that's where the request goes. So that's really important to think about when you're talking about stock rooms, is think about how your organization deploys, receives back, puts your stuff to store to go to disposal, all that kind of stuff. What do we do to manage that hardware asset? And make sure I have my corresponding stock room set up. Make sure we have your location, I'm going to get in a second. You have your type, whatever it is, and then your assignment groups. You might want to have assignment groups so cases can be assigned automatically to those particular people. And you want to have a manager set up as well too, because a lot of the defaults out of the box processes might send a trigger to the manager, the stockroom manager. You can even get into hours of operation as well too. Right? And you can do things, it's pretty fancy compared to what it used to be. You can see here that I've got stock rules set up, and we'll talk about that in a minute as well too. And all the stock rules are set up against this particular stock room. So locations I mentioned briefly, and I do have a video, and I don't think I have that video posted in the hardware asset management channel. It's one I did for enterprise asset management a while back, and it talks about location hierarchies. And what I mean by that is, if I take a look at these locations, trying to think of how to show this. If I take a look at these locations, right, I can see that under North America, I have California. Underneath California, I have Santa Ana. And underneath that, I have that location. So these are location hierarchies. And again, that comes in really handy to have those hierarchies set up, especially when you're doing things like service locations and distribution channels, right? So I could say, for example, I don't have good data in here, but wish I did. I wish I had set this up properly for locations. But if I want to say, so I'm in Manitoba, for example, right? If basically the Toronto stockroom serves all of Canada, then I could have put the stockroom, I could have put in the service location that this particular warehouse in Manitoba, let's say, serves all of Canada, and I can actually add that there. So I have a good video on that. And what'll happen is it'll capture everything underneath it if you're using that location hierarchy. So check out your locations is what I'm saying. See how your locations are structured in your organization, and think about the power of these stock rooms now to be able to do things like help you with inventory control and management, being able to service how you work your organization. Any questions on that? I know we covered a lot here in stock rooms.
Yeah, I do. I
Sure, go
do
ahead.
real quick.
Sure.
So you have multiple stock rooms, and let's just say, for the sake of argument, I am in Los Angeles,
Okay.
and my Los Angeles stock room doesn't have what I want.
Correct.
So am I, as a tech, able to look at a San Francisco stock room or a San Diego stock room and say, oh, they have what I want, and move it to the Los Angeles stock room so that I don't have to purchase?
Absolutely. 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 And there's a lot of pieces built in that can help you do that, right?
Okay.
It depends on how what you're fulfilling. So you said you're a tech, right? So you're a tech and you need a new hard drive for a laptop, and you can see that it's got it in that other location. It depends. It could be part of the RMA process, right? Which case you'd be able to see it as part of the RMA process potentially, or you may say maybe even maybe somebody requested, they put in a request for, as I said, for a mouse, and you need to deploy that mouse, right? But you don't have it. Maybe one of the other ones does. So you can ship it. You can issue a transfer order from there. So there's the source request. So as part of the procurement process, which can actually do that. There's transfer orders, which can actually help do that, which can trigger that. So there's a whole bunch of different processes built into HAM, depending on what you're using, to make your life easier to see where that inventory is. And that's why stockrooms are so important, and why when your assets aren't deployed, you know where they are, right? And they're sitting in a stock room when they're not out there being deployed. So you can see it as part of all these different operational processes that you're using to run your business. So that's why stock rooms are on the crawl phase of maturity, because they're so critical to proper inventory management and you being able to do your job to fulfill that request using a transfer order and get it done faster. Because the faster we can help our users, right, and get the stuff into their hands, the happier they're going to be and the more they're going to use your system. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay. So perfect. Yeah. So stock rooms are really, really critical for a lot of flows, a lot of processes within the tool. So think about how you're structured. Think about how you want to set up these stock rooms, and then where you go from there. Right. You may have also field service management potentially. I don't know what kind of organizations you guys are. Maybe you are part of field service management, and they also use stock rooms, right? And so other things use stock rooms, not just HAM. That's why if you're an original, say you're what we call base asset management customer, you still had stock rooms, absolutely. But now it's expanding, right? You can do a lot more stuff with HAM. And they're just getting more and more powerful for that inventory management piece. So I'm going to jump back here. Any more questions on stock rooms before I come in here and complete this one? No? Okay, good. All right. Close out some of these tabs. Try and get through some of this. How am I doing on time? Been good for a bit. This should refresh now. I don't know where it went, but yeah, Stockrooms was here. I don't know what I did to it. I did something, or maybe I was in another instance. I don't know. I got too many open. So we're going to keep moving on and not worry about where that went. We're going to talk about hardware models, right? And this is basically, do you know how your models are being created? Have you got all of your models created, or do you know how to create models within your instance, right? Models can be created through multiple different ways. The odds are, I don't think anybody here said they're a greenfield customer. So that means that your model, you probably already have tons of hardware models in your instance, because if you have any kind of discovery source like ServiceNow Discovery, SCCM, Intune, whatever, the odds are you have hardware models already in your environment, right? And they're already automatically being created. What we always say as part of asset management best practice is, you as a hardware asset management tech analyst, whatever, fulfiller, you basically want to have your assets in your instance, in your environment, like the record for those assets before they actually arrive on site. That's the best practice. So you should order your, say, laptop, right? And then the vendor should be sending you what's called an advanced ship notice, or a notice saying, okay, hey, you ordered 10 laptops. Here are the serial numbers for all 10 that we shipped you. You receive that, you basically load that data, the advanced ship notice, into your system, which is going to create those shell asset records based off the model you ordered. And it's going to create the shell asset records and the shell CI records automatically, right? Because they're computers, they're going to create a CI as well. And then you receive those, right? So then you receive them into a stock room. So you'll see those 10 assets received into a stock room, and then a technician will grab one off the box, and we'll load it up, and we'll add it to the discovery tool, and boom, Discovery picks it up, matches with the CI, and populates the rest of the data. That's in theory what should be happening across the organization. So you know what's coming into your organization before it actually gets there. That's, of course, wishful thinking in 99.9% of cases. Very rarely do I actually see that happening with any customer. Some try, but it's very rare that you don't see stuff coming in that hasn't been tracked. Ideally, you want to set up that process so you know about every single thing that's being purchased. That takes a long time and a lot of organizational change. So you need to know how to create those models for that process, whether you're creating it manually or whether your discovery tools are automatically creating it. So this is about knowing how your models are being created and being able to create them yourself, and understand how to create those models and how you're using it. And then also we'll get into normalization as another maturity item, I think. Does that make sense to everybody about what this one is about? And that's important. There's a big topic, and actually we are in the process, we Rangers are on the process of putting together a mini series on hardware models. There's a lot of questions about hardware models, normalization, some issues with that process I just explained for you, and duplicate models being created, etc. So we have, I think we're going to probably do like maybe 4 webinars on it and another video for sure on hardware.
Oh, sign me up. Sign me up.
Okay, you will all be notified. You will all be notified. Come to the office hours, and that's where we will have those released. We're in the process of, we're still in the talking phases about how and what we want to, how we want to deliver this, but we have to. It's a big issue that we need to tackle in terms of the duplication of models. That's becoming a bigger, because more and more customers are actually following that process I just explained and pre-creating their models. But then Discovery is creating duplicate models. So that's the issue.
No, absolutely. And for those just starting out, model madness is what we call it. Constantly chasing the model.
We have a potential solution. It's not something we want to, it's, again, it's a customization. So that comes with risk. So, but we're and I'm also bugging people like Yvette on the product side. So Anyway, we'll get into more of that. Again, models are a big topic. Stay tuned for all you new people. I'm not going to bore you with that confusing talk. You will run into some of these things, so come to the hardware model one when we do it. So I'm going to complete this, and we will go through and check out the next one. Any last questions on the hardware models? Everybody's kind of clear about just really it's about understanding how they're being made and knowing how they're getting into your system and being able to create them manually if need be, and how you would do that. And we do have some, again, we're going to have a lot of content coming out of it. Normalized asset estate. This is what we talked about, normalization, right? And part of your guided setup was downloading the content and then triggering the normalization job. So hardware model normalization will happen on a daily basis. It also happens when you say if I created a model manually, it will run through the normalization process as well. But really, what this particular one is about is understanding, do I know how to look and manage my normalization of my hardware models? And that's a big model madness, right? Topic that to discuss. So what I would recommend for anybody new, and I already did it in this instance, I'll go to a cleaner instance. What I recommend for anybody new to hardware asset management is come into your models. Sorry, this is going to take a second to load because I haven't loaded it here. I'm usually working in hardware models. You're 99% of the time, you're likely going to be working in hardware models or consumable models. And I would add, to make my life easier, I add normalization status. That's definitely a field I want to add. So I can see the status of that. So I can come down in here, I can add normalization status and move that up a little bit and click OK. And now I can see my normalization status of all of my models. And what normalized means, if I look at one of these that's fully normalized, I use the term fully normalized. It's not an actual official term. To me, what fully normalized means is it has all three values that I need, right? It has the manufacturer, it has the product, and it has the model. These are the three values I need to consider. The system will consider it normalized. I personally consider it fully normalized. I distinguish between the two because some of the reports in the system say things like partially normalized or manufacturer normalized are still normalized. I don't agree with that. So yes, I do disagree with the tool sometimes. So to me, it's important I have all three of these values populated properly. So when I'm looking at my models, I can basically come in here and now I can group by my normalization status to see what I look at. I can also use this dashboard here, right? And I can come down and see I have my normalization metrics where I have 152 normalized and 9 not normalized. To be honest, I don't even know what this filter does. I don't use it. I use what I do, but it's going to basically. Okay, so it is now looking. They changed it. Before it used to look at partially normalized. Now it is looking at normalized. So that's fine, but it's doing it by class. And either way, my suggestion, when you're in model management, just add the normalization status for yourself. I find it very helpful. If your organization has a need for life cycle information, and by that I mean understanding what your hardware is end of life or end of support, then normalization is very, very important for you. Normalization is always good to have because it's going to bring in that additional information like product type. Like if we look at one, it's going to bring in other things like device type, computer server. It brings in some potentially, this one doesn't have, it could bring in some of this particular information. You know, all these, when it's fully normalized, if some of this information exists in the content library, it will actually populate a lot of some of this data for you if it's fully normalized. And the other big thing it does is it does life cycle information. Now, again, this one isn't. So this particular one doesn't have that. I guess it's probably a really old server because this is demo data. So if any of you are in a financial organization, the odds are you have compliance regulations you are going to have to deal with.
Mhm.
Special audit regulation. We see lots and lots and lots of our financial customers having to deal with, and I don't know what audit regulation it is because I'm not an audit expert, but you need to have life cycle information for your hardware and software. And so if you do not have these values in there, if life cycle information exists in our content library, you will not get it because you need to have these three values. So am I worried as much if I'm not a financial organization? Well, it's nice to have these normalized, right? Is it the end of the world? No. But if I'm a financial organization, I want to make sure all of these values I go through this stuff and I make sure I match where I can.
I have a question,
Yes.
and maybe it's under normalization and maybe it fits under something else. So we have Ham Basic, we don't have Pro obviously stood up yet. So we have a lot of data that's in there that might be ancient. So
Yeah.
my question becomes, when we're standing up Ham Pro and we want to do normalization, should we dump the data that we have and then start clean, or leave the data in
I
the
would run some, yeah, I would definitely run some reports. And I would take a look at how many CIs and assets are related to those models. And because the odds are you probably have some old models in there that no longer have anything associated with them if you've been around a long time. So I would say yes, it's safe to get rid of ones where there's no existing assets or CIs, and then make sure there's no catalogs. Where am I? Why is this not clearing? Restart defaults. So if I look at like say this one here, I can see, okay, there is no assets associated with this one. There's no configuration associated with them. There's no catalog items associated with this one, right? The odds are this is an old model I can purge and I can delete it. And that way it's one less that I'm dealing with in terms of having to manage normalization on.
Sean,
So that would be my suggestion. Be careful though. You need to do your homework, right? And make sure that there's no assets or CIs associated with it, especially there could be catalog items associated with it. There could be contracts associated with it, right? So
well,
you want to check and make sure.
and that's my concern. I mean, what if there's assets that are showing, but the assets then, if we go to a different source of truth, is like retired and it just never updated it because maybe the API, the integration just wasn't working.
Yeah, it could be. It could be. It's harder. It's harder to do cleanup. It takes time, unfortunately. But yes, it's not a bad idea to get rid of them if you can. As I said, there's no easy way to go through it because I can't say for sure, okay, you can delete these ones. Well, I don't know your organization, right? So I don't want to say that for sure.
When you go to the details view workspace, can you see when this model was created?
Oh, for sure.
Because it could be a very old
It could be.
asset or model.
Absolutely. These are some fields I use quite often. I use created by, and I
Yep.
usually use updated and updated by. These are going to be on every single table,
Yep.
Okay.
right? These values are on every single table in ServiceNow. And the good thing is I can see, I don't know if I scroll right, I can see, okay, this was created by admin or system or maintenance. Those are usually ones that are automatically created by the system. But you might see some old ones created by a specific username, maybe, right? And it was created, yeah, listen, it's created in 2006.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, this is demo data, right? So that's pretty old. That's 19 years ago, right? So, oh my God, that's
Okay.
old. Man, we're
That
getting
makes
old,
sense.
aren't we? Sheesh. 2006.
What?
2006 doesn't seem that long ago, but it was 19 years ago. That's right. I do have a 19-year-old kid. But in this case, yeah, you can check to see if you've got anything else. So again, that's what my suggestion would be on model management is, yeah, if you're new, you haven't installed Ham yet, it's not a bad idea to try and get rid of some of them. Don't stress too much about your normalization percentage, right? You don't have to stress necessarily about your normalization percentage right away. unless potentially you're a financial organization that's going to have this audit and reporting compliance regulation, then it becomes a higher priority for you to manage your life cycle data. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to keep moving here because I keep talking and I apologize. We've still got half an hour, right, Yvette? She's still there.
I'm here, muted. Sorry, yes, you have a half an hour.
Oh man, I am talking too much. Okay, I'm going to speed things up here a bit. Content portal, we talked about that in the first one, making sure that plugin is installed. I can see it right here. Content portal, I know this one's good, so I can go ahead and start this one up. Content portal is working great. Let's check off that maturity item. Same thing with mobile app. We went through that as part of the other process. I made sure that application was installed. Make sure you install. Again, there's 2 applications for ServiceNow. There's ServiceNow Mobile. That is more for your end users. And then there's ServiceNow Agent. That would be one that you or your inventory people or your field staff or whatever would use the agent application. That allows you to receive POs. That allows you to do asset audits, right? So those kind of things are done through the mobile app. So I definitely recommend having that installed if it's not by default.
100%.
And it might even be for, I'm sorry, I couldn't see who was speaking there about the, you haven't installed it yet. It still might, the asset mobile is not part of HAM as well too. So it still might be there. When you install HAM, it gives it additional functionality like audit, but it's probably already installed. So I can go ahead and complete that one. Workspace. Well, we know Workspace is there because, well, we're in it. So if you can, I kind of think this one's funny because if I can see the maturity item, then I know that Workspace is enabled. So, but again, older customers that have had HAM for a while might potentially not have that installed. And we do have some customers who had HAM installed for a while and aren't using it who might be part of these webinars. All right, so then we can go ahead here now. We should have a few more done. Again, very simple ones. I went through those pretty quick. We went through the normalized one as well too, so I can close that one out. And we'll see what's left here. Okay, these ones are longer topics. I will try and get through them. I'm going to skip this one because it's going to bring up 150,000 questions. So we're going to get on to hardware assets and bulk inventory items. Now, remember we talked about stock rooms and we talked about the importance of stock rooms. And you saw when I was in stock room that there were those stock rules that were set up. And what a stock rule does is a stock rule is used to automatically trigger either transfer orders from that other location we talked about, right? Or they are set up to trigger a vendor purchase, depending on my stock rule, what it is. And it does that when a certain threshold is met. So let's say, for example, when I'll go into one of my stock rooms real quick. And I'll see here all of my, say, for example, my consumables, right? And I can see, I don't have any quantities actually in here. So I don't have any. I don't have any consumables in here, but I just want to say, so basically Apple iPad 3 here. So basically what it means is I can see this stock rule is set up so that when this particular model, so I always want to have iPads in my stock room because it's a very commonly requested item, right? If I want people to be happy, I need to get that to them fast when it goes through the request and approval process, it needs to come fast to them. So I always want to make sure I have inventory on hand, right? So I can see that this stock rule is set up so that the threshold is 20 and it always keeps 10 on stock. So basically it's easier. Maybe it's easier for me to show you a stock rule. Here it is here. I'll open. All right, so what it is model Apple iPad 3 for the Southern California warehouse. It basically has a threshold of 10. So I always want to have 10 on order or 10 in stock in this warehouse. When it goes below 10, what's going to happen is it's going to trigger a restock from the vendor, which is going to trigger a purchase order or bulk inventory purchase for a quantity of 10. And it's going to automatically trigger that for me. So you were saying, somebody was asking earlier, what happens if I transfer it from another location? Well, it could trigger this automatically could trigger a transfer order. So you had none in your stock room. but there was like a central warehouse with like 50, it could trigger an automatic transfer order as well to transfer it to that stockroom. So you don't even need it yet, but you already have some on the way for you. And it helps keep that refresh time down. It always helps keep your stock rooms at certain levels, so you always have the things you need the most on hand with as many as you need on hand at any given time. So that's really, really handy about stock rules. I don't even remember what we're talking about now. And then sorry, the bulk inventory stock order. So you can also trigger a manual bulk inventory stock order. In here it says, where is it? No, I'm gonna close. I have too much stuff open. Here. Navigate to inventory, submit stock order. So I can do that through this. This is the old school way of doing it. Right. So if I go to inventory, I go to submit stock order, and I can submit a stock order. But you'll see what it does. It actually pulls up the catalog item. And so this is actually in the service catalog as well. So if I come to my service catalog, I should see that flow. No, it's probably called inventory. I can never remember what it's called. No. Hardware inventory stock order. Right. So I can actually search for it, or I can see it as part of the asset lifecycle. So all of these different catalog items, and this is part of that guided setup that we didn't really get too detailed into. All these catalog items are already there in the system for you and active when you install ham. So I can't remember who it was who's saying they don't have ham installed yet. When you install ham, it's going to give you all of these by default will be there. So inventory stock orders right here. You also have refresh order, RMA order. All of these default out of the box flows and catalog items are here. So that's what that one is about, knowing how to trigger an inventory stock order. So if I need to order more to replenish the stock room, I can just pick whichever model I want to order. All right, I want to do hybrid solid state drive, sure. Quantity 15. Which stock room do I want to go to? And then an order, right? And that's going to basically trigger an order of, it's going to trigger not an order, but it's going to trigger the creation of a PO or request. Sorry, request, which can trigger the location or creation of a PO. So again, that's part of the request process, which we're not going to get into too deep today. I'm going to try not to. Yeah, I'm going to try not to anyway. And that's this particular maturity item. Any questions on that one? And the reason this is in the crawl phase is because it's always good to keep, again, we're trying to get people into using and thinking about good inventory management, right? Because inventory management is really going to help a lot of your process. And so again, making sure you have inventory of your most requested items is not usually a bad thing, depending on the cost, of course. Some organizations don't. They do real time or ordering, or they do, but some organizations like to be able to just have like 5, 6, 7 laptops or mice on hand so that they can keep their users happy when something breaks or if they need something. I'm sure you've all been in the case where, you get an email or get a phone call saying, "Hey, yeah, John's starting today. Do you have a laptop for them?" That happens all the time, right? Improper onboarding processes, you don't get any notification. John's a billable resource that's going to be making the company a couple $100 an hour every time he uses something, and he doesn't have a laptop for 2 weeks because you got to order it. That never goes over well, right? So that's kind of what this is about. So go through that, think about that, and then think about using the bulk stock order form or setting up stock rules to automatically trigger those. And there's videos on that as well too. Asset disposal I talked about earlier, right? And again, this is an important thing. Crawl is really talking about trying to control and trying to understand what's coming into your organization and what is going out of your organization. Most of you probably have a disposal vendor already set up. If you're not a ham customer, you probably don't really have a great way of tracking and managing those disposal certificates. And that's the key piece of information, is that disposal certificate. And that's why disposal orders are such an important part of the crawl process. right? And making sure you have a good and effective way of managing the disposal of your hardware assets, right? There are compliance and security reasons why you want to make sure all of your data is wiped, securely destroyed, right? All the data leaks and data breaches that we've had out there in the world, again, especially if any of you, those financial, any kind of PII data, right? That stuff is so highly regulated. You have to make sure that any kind of data potentially on those hard drives is getting destroyed properly, and you have that certificate that proves that and basically transfers the liability to that disposal company. So, Faye, for example, you give all your laptops to Joe Schmo's disposal company, and he takes them and throws them in a landfill, and some environment person comes along, finds all these assets, his laptops in a landfill. They look up the serial number and it's registered to you. You are liable for that, unless you can prove that it went to Joe Schmo's disposal company. Right. So there's a lot of risk associated with not disposing your assets properly, not to mention like the security, PII, blah, blah, blah. So what the disposal flow does is allows you to track that and allows you to actually successfully and properly dispose of those assets. And it tracks it from the minute, like basically, you create a disposal order, you add those devices to it, you ship it, the other company receives it, and you can't actually close that disposal order till you attach a disposal certificate. So now if somebody calls me up and say, hey, we found this laptop in the dump, and you look up the serial number, you can then see the official, well, I disposed of that on X date to Joe Schmo Company, and here's a certificate of disposal that says they disposed of it securely and properly. So if you found it in the landfill, that fine is going to them, right? And they're out of business and they're in big trouble, right? So that liability gets transferred off to another person. Any questions on that? And again, we have a video on this. I'm not going to go through how to create a disposal order. Watch the video, but it's important as part of your crawl process to make sure you've got that effective way of getting rid of that asset securely and safely. Okay. I'm going to complete that one. That leaves us with the big one, which I've been avoiding. And this is actually going to be one of the first, not necessarily this, where to go, standard hardware request flow, but asset refresh request is going to be one of the first mini series that we do. The request. Most of your organizations, and you probably already do, even if you have base asset management, you probably still already have something in place for a request process for people to request new hardware be purchased. And this is really about trying to get a standardization and trying to get proper process put around that, which is going to allow you to have everything that's purchased hardware-wise and hardware asset-wise coming through the standardized process. And that is a big organizational change. That's why I kind of avoided this topic. It's big to set up your service catalog, or maybe you're not using a service catalog, right? You need to understand your request process and your request flow, and you need to potentially change your request flow so that if the request and approval process happens outside of your ServiceNow instance, you still need to know what that process is, and you need to insert yourself as a hardware asset manager into that process, so you're continually getting notified of those devices as they're procured and before they come into your environment. So, of course, as part of the maturity, we recommend using the ServiceNow Service Catalog. Lots of customers do use the Service Catalog as well, and they use it for 100 different things, right? So if you're an existing customer and you have, say, ITSM, you probably already have Service Catalog in your environment, or Employee Portal, right? Kind of thing with catalog items in your environment to handle that request process. Ideally, you want to examine that. You want to look at the flow, and you want to see, is it doing what we need it to do as an organization? Because now that we can have HAM in there, now we got our stock rooms in there, now that we're auditing all of our stuff and we know where all of our assets are, we can more effectively do our inventory management. We can deploy from stock, because again, it's hard to save a lot of money on a continual basis with ham. Once you kind of get it cleaned up, your estate cleaned up, and you know what's going on, it's hard to continually get that, return on investment, just let's say from ham. But what you can really use it for is optimizing what you already have today, right? So I'm that user who started and I had to deploy that laptop because nobody told me about it. And then 2 days later, they leave the company, right? And so you've got a laptop that's 2 days old that goes back into inventory. And then another user starts up, and do you order another laptop for that guy? Right? No, you want to reuse what was already deployed and set up initially. You want to be able to reuse that hardware so you're effectively using what you already own before you purchase new. And that's really what this is about. So you want that source that comes into this section here where we're talking about source requests. And I do have a video on that as well too. Whereas if you're using the procurement plugin, whether you're doing POs in ServiceNow or not, if you're using the procurement plugin and you do that PO, that you add that procurement plugin, you can actually source the request coming in, and that will allow you to see that existing inventory, right? So I'm requesting a Lenovo T14, and the fulfiller goes through and they look and they source that request and say, okay, I have 3. I don't have any of these in the local office, but I have 3 in another office. I'm going to transfer 1 from that other office rather than repurchasing new. So that's really what this is about, is your request process, controlling what is coming into your organization, understanding the processes that it's coming in. If you don't have a process, start creating that process, right? Think about using the service catalog to do that for you, right? Publish specific models to the catalog, right? Service catalog and standardizing your procurement is huge. You can standardize your standard laptops, your standard servers, your standard disks. It helps a lot of things. It helps optimize things as well too, down when it's easier to repair. If you always have a T14, you always know what's going to break on it. You always have parts for it. Technicians know how to take them apart, whatever, right? That's kind of a good thing about standardization. So that will really help. If you get a good standard request process in, you can then start standardizing and saying, hey, and your users, say you standardize on a Lenovo T14 with 16 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs solid state drive, and that's your standard. You get the best purchasing deal, you get the best price, right? Because you're purchasing the same one over and over again. And a user requests a laptop, and oh man, I want 32 gigs of RAM. And then they put in a custom order, and the custom order is going to take 4 weeks, 5 weeks for delivery. Or they can suck it up, take 16 gigs of RAM, and have the laptop tomorrow. They're going to probably take the laptop tomorrow, right? Instead of having to wait 6 weeks. So that helps drive standardization as well, too, when you can fulfill quicker with standardization.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
So this is not something that we're doing today, zero touch hardware, but we are, really thinking about it as we're looking to implement Ham Pro.
Okay.
So is there like a plugin, and is it even recommended to provision and automate between zero touch hardware and asset warranty integration? Thinking about, especially with refresh.
Yeah, and I'm relatively new to the whole zero touch as well. I'll be honest, I haven't played with a customer implementation, but I don't think there's any new plugins that are required. You can see the flows were already there when I looked at the service catalog, right? I can see there's already the zero touch refresh flow that's built into Ham. So it's definitely something you want to, it's definitely good to have. Like if you set up and you're a big organization, like we use zero touch. Zero touch actually spawned from our own internal ServiceNow team developing this. And for those of you who don't know what it is, essentially is I'm a brand new onboarding user. And I basically get a form to fill out that says, I want a Windows laptop. What happens is that request actually gets diverted, goes directly to, I don't remember who it is for our case. I think it was maybe Insight or something like that. And Insight fulfills that request and ships me the laptop. Meanwhile, all of that's still, the request process and everything's still integrated within your own instance, and you're getting that data coming in, but somebody else is fulfilling it for you. So your hardware asset management team isn't touching anything. It's all done by a third party, but you're still getting all the benefits of tracking those assets through and coming into your organization, into your instance. You're getting all that data coming back into you. You just don't actually have to deploy anybody to deal with it. Once it's approved, it does its thing and it all comes into your instance. So it's a fairly complicated process, but it's definitely one that saves a lot of operational overhead, right? And that's probably why you're looking at doing it.
Yeah, especially that I do have a remote team.
Yeah.
And so it's something that we're looking at for a new hire and also a refresh schedule.
Absolutely. It takes a lot of middleman out, right? You don't have to then provision and stock things in your own warehouses, etc., right? It takes a big chunk of that inventory management process away from you because you have, like as you said, remote people everywhere. Leverage the power of the vendor.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, and the warranty pieces of it, yeah, definitely. The warranty integrations are coming as part of HAM today. I think it is Dell, I want to say. Is it Dell, Yvette, or is it Lenovo? Who do we have today?
Lenovo.
Dell?
It's
Lenovo?
Dell. We have Lenovo, we're going to have Dell.
Okay, so we got a couple different ones coming. The automatic integrations, but they're starting. It's starting to be built into HAM. So as long as you have that serial number populated for Dell, right? There's a back end process, and I haven't looked into which that job is. We'll go out and look for that and populate it. The warranty information.
From what I understand, though, the Lenovo plugin is a paid plugin, right? It could be part of your suite, but if it's not, you have to pay for the Lenovo plugin.
Okay, that's good to know. I haven't played with that feature yet because it's relatively new, so I haven't played with it yet. That's good to know. We'll check into that. But yeah, it's nice to have that automated for sure. If you're doing zero touch refresh, right, and the asset ownership is transferring to you, and they're not, say, leased assets, you know, that should be part of the process. When that laptop gets deployed to the end user, you should be getting all of the information relevant to that laptop, including warranty, right? Off the record, one of the things I don't like about our advanced ship notice, which is again part of that process that we talked about, where the vendor will ship you a list, send you a list of all the serial numbers and models that you've ordered, and you import that into the system. It creates your asset. There's no field for warranty. I don't necessarily agree with that. You know, when that vendor is sending you those laptops, they should be sending you the warranty information. Just like with zero refresh, they should be including the warranty information with that asset. And you have the power to go back to your vendors and say, this is mandatory. You want to do business with me, you provide me this information. And they will. It's more work for them. They won't offer it up, you know, but you have the power to say that to them, and you can get them to send you warranty information. It's absolutely the same thing with unit costs, right? Unit costs, warranty, those are absolute things that you want to be tracking as those new assets are being procured and brought into your environment. So, and I do have ideas in there well about the advanced ship notice, because I think it needs other things like cost currency. A lot of your organizations are global and you purchase in multiple currencies, and it's important when you're creating your assets to create and you using unit cost to do it in the currency, the local currency, and let the system convert it for you. So you can track your actual costs.
I could interject for a moment. Having ham in, but not being at all mature with it. Like, you know, we had Deloitte as our implementation vendor. So certainly these maturity items, we haven't hit all of these, and we don't have that part set up yet. So this is a really good walkthrough for today. One of the things we've run into is, you know, I work for a global manufacturing company, and we have plants everywhere. So standardization around process is extremely difficult. Like we have direct with Dell purchasing for most of our environment, but not all. We have disposal vendors for most of our environment, but not all, that provide certificates. So we always have like this one-off, you know, exception process that needs to be created, and I'm wondering if we should have, multiple processes in the tool, because today we end up sort of running, we create the overall process, like we broke our disposal process slightly by saying you don't have to provide a certificate if one's not provided by the vendor, and now so it's not required, and then that creates bad behavior by our field services teams and not, necessarily attaching them. So, yeah, trying to work around those parameters has been very challenging.
Yeah, it's tough, and I see organizations like that too, especially the global organizations. And you can't. Procurement's a nightmare.
Yeah,
As much as it's great to say we want to have one standard process across the globe, it's really, really, really hard to do. So yeah, a lot of organizations do unfortunately have to have multiple processes. And the key is to make those processes easy so that we don't get things like them not doing the disposal certificates, because that's so important, right?
right.
It can cost a lot of money. So making the processes easy, they may have to be different per geography, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But the key is, are they, the processes that I implement, are they going to, are they giving us the information we need? Right. We have a different procurement process. Okay. So I'm procuring for this, and I can set up distribution channels, and I can set up service locations and all that, and different warehouses in the tool, and have things procured through a different vendor. But the key is, when I'm receiving them, am I getting warranty, cost, location, all this kind of data coming in, so I have full visibility as they're coming in through that process. And then again, do I have processes in place to track them throughout their life and dispose of them? They have to maybe do different, which sucks for you. Standardize where you can, but the key is make the process easy so they do it, and you have the data and you have the visibility.
Yep, for sure. And,
it's
that's just a maturity thing, right? That we're now realizing we should create a separate process for those.
It's organizational change, right? And that's the
Yep.
hardest piece, right? Until you get the buy-in from senior management that are going to enforce that, right? Enforce proper inventory management processes, right? That's some of the good things about tracking your warranty and your ship dates and your receive dates and all that, is so you can see how long, for example, stuff's sitting on the shelf, especially when you're, consuming warranty by it sitting on the shelf doing nothing. You're consuming lease costs if you're leasing assets by it, and that's just process, and you can track all that data. You can run reports, and you can show some of the inefficiencies and say, hey, we've got this inefficient process that's costing X amount of dollars. It's coming out of your budget, dude. You want to fix this? And then they go, okay, yes, I need that money back. So, and that's unfortunately, sometimes it takes that to get that organizational change.
So just a couple other things to throw out there, maybe for future sessions. Hopefully, these kinds of topics will roll in. But we've had a lot of struggle around how the roles are defined. So, our field services folks kind of have a similar role to the asset people, so they can create. They can't bulk load, but they can, they can sometimes create problems. We'll just say.
Yes, they can.
And then in our new world, asset doesn't have a lot of control over a lot of fields or dashboards and things like that. So I think we have kind of, a maturity around trying to get the roles right. And then the other item is really just asset types outside of EUC. Like, we have struggles around procurement and life cycle, because we do have them included in our disposal for servers and network devices, but then there's always a fight because our field services people don't feel responsible for those being in scope. And, it's this whole, so it's kind of about roles again, when you look at it that way, but
it is,
that's a lot of what we have run into in our, year one journey that we're on.
Yeah, there's not a lot of roles within ham. I think there's ham user, ham admin. That's pretty much it, right? So most organizations like yours do have to go down the custom role route. We don't actually have anything on roles slated at the moment. It is a tough topic. And again, it comes down to customization, which we try and stay away from that topic. That's a bad word, right? Customization equals technical debt that you have to maintain over time. So we try and avoid suggesting customizations. But yeah, that's a lot of organizations have to do it, right? Because for whatever reason, right? You're a global organization. Maybe one country can't see the other countries, et cetera, et cetera. And you got to weigh the pros and cons of domain separate. It's the whole big topic. Yeah. It's
Yep.
tough. Who can see what, when, where, and how? Yeah.
Good to know. Thank you.
Yes. Sorry, I know roles is a good one, but we don't have anything slated. I'll get it on there. I just don't know how yeah, I don't know how I tackle that one.
Right.
That's a tough can of
It ends
worms.
up being re-education, I guess. And, we do work really closely with the CMDB team, and we're
Perfect.
getting some of that governance in place. So I think we'll start catching things
Oh,
outside
good.
the parameter. We're still in data cleanup. I heard comment earlier about what kind of a mess are you going to be looking at with existing data. Oh, have fun. We've had ours since 2016, so it was
Yeah.
messy to get cleaned up afterwards, and we're still
It
working
is.
on it.
It is,
Yeah,
unfortunately, yeah. And
the
that's
model
why,
stuff. Yeah.
I use that term a lot. It's, you can use those terms. Don't try and boil the ocean. And it's a marathon, not a sprint, all those cheesy acronyms, but it's really true about asset management, right? When you're trying to build out that foundational data and you're trying to build that best in class processes, it takes time.
Yes,
The
for
asset
sure.
management does not happen overnight, and unfortunately that's what a lot of organizations get stuck with, that right. We get a lot of customers coming through our doors that don't understand that how much work it was involved. It is, there's a lot of work. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but when you
Right.
do, you can really show those efficiencies. And I don't know if anybody's ever seen my series on the Success Portal, but goals are a great way of doing it. Success goals are a great way of tracking your progress. Because unfortunately, asset management is one of those ones where you're really working on cost avoidance, not necessarily cost savings. So when it comes down to the books, right, you don't actually show a lot of savings per se, because it doesn't show up on the books. You're doing cost avoidance, which prevents you from having to spend more, and that's where you need to show that, and that's where the success goals are great at showing they're saving your potential avoidance costs, right? So think about that as well, because everybody wants ROI, right? We want ROI on this
Yeah.
product. Well, track them in success goals so you can show that cost avoidance, not just your cost savings. Yeah.
Oh, and just one other thought in closing.
Sure.
We talk about model management a lot because it's
Yes.
a very challenging topic. We did make one move to hook up with our architecture team and get the standards as they were changing up front so that we could request the model information, and
Correct.
then just created a ticket and got those in ahead of time. So we haven't even purchased some of those items yet, but at least we're able to get in front of them for our different
Yes.
device types.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of organizations do that when they start to standardize, right? When you start to standardize, you can get those devices in, you can basically look at them, fire them up, right? And
Yeah.
assess them. Are they going to be your new standard? Yes. Make sure you inventory them when they
Yeah.
come in. And if you inventory them, the model gets auto-created, and then you can start procuring them as well too. So that's a really good way of doing it too. A lot of organizations will inventory that test model you get, and
Yeah.
that way it's set up in the system. Then when a discovery tool picks it up, you've already got it.